Good morning, Jamming Jellies. Sorry for the slight delay. We were having a little bit of technical difficulty, but we are ready to go with another day of Winter Kids Club programs and activities. So we're so glad that you are joining us this morning. Now, my name is Sarah. I work in the education department here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, and you have tuned in, Jammin' Jellies, for a program on wetlands. Now, you might be wondering, what in the world is a wetland? And we're going to talk all about what this habitat, or place where we might find animals, what it's like if you look at a wetland. Right here, this picture right here. Now, I'm not alone in the studio. That picture changed by the magic of my coworker, Jen, who's behind the screens, and she's going to change what you see here. And then I also have Amanda here in the office with me, and she is going to be taking your questions and observations. That's right. You can text in your questions, your observations, anything you'd like to share with us, and Jen's going to put up that number for you to text right now. So that number right here is 562-286-1838. So throughout the program, I'm going to ask lots of questions, and I want to hear your observations, your questions, your answers, and you can text them into that number right there. Now, do keep in mind that text and data rates do apply, and if you're one of our younger viewers, make sure you have an adult permission before you text in. Now, if you are watching this program live, so it is 9 a.m. on, we're in January already, January 5th, you can go ahead and text us in. Woohoo, January! You can go ahead and text us in. But if you're watching this program when we're not live anymore, so it's after like 9:30 on January 5th, you can go ahead and email us. We'd still love to hear from you, but we're not always manning that text line, so go ahead and email us at live@lbaop.org. And one more thing before we get started, we have activities that are attached to all of our Winter Kids Club program, and you can find those on our website. And while you're doing those activities or while you're participating in these programs, we would love to see you in action. So if you'd like to share all your adventures with our Winter Kids Club, we do have this hashtag right here. It's hashtag AOP Kids Club, and you can tag us, and we'd love to see what you're doing as you're adventuring and exploring with us here at the aquarium. All right, Jammin' Jellies, are you ready to get started? All right, so we're going to explore a wetland. Now, when you hear that name, even without a picture, what do you imagine when you hear that name, wetland? There's kind of two parts to that word, wet and land. So that might give us a clue of what this habitat might look like. So I'm going to step off the screen, and Jen's going to put up maybe another image or a video, of a wetland. And I want you to start making some observations. So you can think them in your brain. You can whisper them wherever you are watching. You can share them with anyone you're watching with. Maybe it's a brother or sister or friend or an adult or even your dog or cat or fish. You can even text us in. That number is on the screen. What do you notice about this habitat? Maybe what colors do you see? What things? Do you see any animals, any people, any buildings? What observations can you make? So this is sort of an aerial view. It's sort of like on a, maybe it's a drone or a plane kind of going over a wetland. So we're looking at it from above. So what do you notice? Well, maybe let this play out a little bit, and then, what do you see? We'll watch it one more time, and then we'll go to a closer view of a wetland. But take a look closely. I noticed something the second time I watched this in the water, which I didn't see the first time. I'll point out when we get close to it again. So what do you notice? What things make up this habitat? If you look right here, I noticed there's a boat. I didn't see that the first time I watched it. So that's my observation. All right, we're going to go to a closer look of a wetland. Excellent. Now, this is the same type of habitat we were just looking at, but it's a much closer view, sort of more eye level rather than flying above. So we've got a closer look. So what do you notice here? Does it look the same or different from that other image of a wetland? Do you see anything in this video that you didn't see before? Jen said she sees animals. Absolutely. So we saw a boat that I'm assuming had a person in it, at least one driving that boat. So we saw human animals, maybe. We saw that boat, but we didn't see any birds or other animals. But in this image, when we go a little bit closer, we see some birds. Now, these birds that we see here, they are called ibis, and there's a lot of different wetland birds. And look at them, so cute up close with those long legs and those long beaks. And there they go, flying away. So we are going to take a look at some birds in just a minute, but Amanda brought in some observations. So we're going to stay on this image. Keep sending or thinking of those observations. So, lots of land and water together. That's from Edward. And a little island. You're right, sort of in the middle. So we've got water and land, but then in the middle of the water, there's some more land, like a little island. And Alexis sees lots of birds. And good morning to Miss Amador's class. Thanks for joining us, I believe, again. It's lovely to have you with us. And Abraham said, do wetlands get wet? Excellent question, Abram. And maybe just by watching those videos, we could answer that just by looking. So do wetlands get wet? So their name definitely implies that, and you're right. So the wetland is sort of where there's a lot of wetland, obviously, but what it's going to be is it's where all the water that falls through the ground, sort of in your neighborhood, in your community, on land, it eventually is going to make its way to the ocean. And a lot of times before it makes it to the ocean, it will end up in a wetland. So there's all this swampy land. You might hear of swamps before, or a bog. Looks like this. So all this water can come from all the rain and any rivers that are on land, and they make their way slowly to the ocean, but before they get to the ocean, they stop in the wetland. So we've got wetlands right near our ocean here in Southern California. So you're right, those wetlands do get wet. And if it rains, those wetlands, that water level is going to rise. So it's going to make it even more marshy or swampy. And then if there's less rain, it can definitely dry up a little bit. But you're right, that land is always going to be wet. That's what makes it a wetland. All right, let's see what other observations or questions we had come in. So Miss Amador's class asked, what animals make the wetlands their home? And I'm glad you asked that question because that's where we're going next. We're going to check out some of the animals that live in a wetland. And Allie sees pink legs on those birds. You're right. Those ibis, see if we can get that close-up picture of the ibis. Excellent observations. Their legs definitely are pink. And I'm glad you noticed the colors on these birds because we're going to take a closer look at another inhabitant, another bird that lives in the wetland, and we're going to take a look at what colors we can see on this bird. I'm going to let Jen choose from the couple of birds we talked about. Excellent. We're going to clear this layer because I want you to take a look at this bird. And what do you notice about this bird? So let's share our observations. Take a moment to observe, to take a look at this bird. What do you notice? Are there any colors? Does it have pink legs like that ibis? Nope. But what colors do you see on this bird's legs? Or even on their feet? Or on their body? Or their beak or their head? Because there are not a ton of different colors, but they've got colors all over their body. Now this bird is called a snowy egret. And this one actually is here at the aquarium. His name is Merlin, but this is a common bird you will see at the wetlands. Oh, so Brittany texted in that other image before, she thinks she sees a boat, and we definitely saw a boat in that very first image, but there could be boats in the other images as well, especially if it's a very big wetland. Some wetlands are kind of small, and you probably wouldn't be able to get a boat in there, but some can be really large, and so boats can definitely travel out there. And she asks, do people fish in the wetlands? So whether you're on a boat or just on the land, people do fish. And I'm glad you brought up fish. We will talk about some fish in a couple minutes after we cover a couple of the birds, because fish are another inhabitant of the wetlands. And then someone asked, are there birds related to flamingos because of their legs? Great question and great segue into talking about what we observe on the egret. So they are not related to flamingos other than they're birds, but they do share some common characteristics like their long legs. Now think about, for these birds that live in this marshy sort of wet land where the water's not super deep, but there's mud, there's water, why do you think having long legs is helpful? Now you can't tell on camera, but I'm pretty short. I don't have long legs, so I don't know this advantage. But why can long legs be a helpful thing, especially for this bird who maybe has these feathers? Do you think they want to get their feathers all wet and full of mud? Probably not. It probably doesn't help them stay clean. The snowy egret is so pretty and white, but it also probably doesn't help them fly if they've got lots of water and mud on their wings. And so these long legs, they come in handy. We call them wading birds. So they can wade into the water. They can walk into the water without getting their body wet because of those long legs. And then they go into the water. Let's think. Why do you think they might go into the water. What do you think they're going to find in there? Some friends? Maybe. Those ibis were all together, so they might find some friends and play in the water, but they're really going into the water looking for some snacks, for some food. And so those long legs help them go into the water without getting their body wet. And then you can't really tell here. You can kind of see this right here, this little curve, this way, is part of the egret's neck. So egrets have really long necks. And you can tell here, they have a really long beak. And so those features, the long legs, the long neck, the long beak, help them get food out of the water or the mud without getting their full body wet, without diving into the water. So they just wade in there and they can get their food. Now, you may have noticed their feet. What do you notice about their feet? Does it look like the rest of their legs? No, it's a different color. You're right. What color do you see? That's right. I see yellow too. So their feet are yellow, and we call it like a lure. That means it kind of tries to attract something. So what's really cool about the egret is they'll actually wiggle their toes. Can you wiggle your fingers? Jen's wiggling her fingers too. So we're wiggling our fingers. They kind of look like almost little worms. And that's what the egret does. When their feet are in the mud, when they're looking for food, they're yellow and they'll wiggle them to look kind of like worms. And that might sound kind of gross, but a lot of fish might be trying to snack on those worms. So they'll swim over to the egret thinking their toes are worms. And then the egret really quickly can snatch up that fish in their beak. And so those long legs, those long yellow toes all help the bird to feed. All right, I see we have some more questions coming in. So let's see. Alexa wants to know if alligators or crocodiles live in swamps. Good question. What do you think? Yeah, I think they could. I agree. Definitely. Especially if there's water, there's mud, there's land. Those are all things that a crocodile or an alligator might want for their habitat. Now, it does depend on where you are. So here in our wetlands in Southern California, not very likely that you'll find an alligator or a crocodile unless maybe someone released one they had as a pet, which is not a great idea. But that's where we might find them. But if you're in places like Florida or where the other places where the water is maybe a little bit warmer, wetlands, those marshy, swampy areas could definitely be home to alligators or crocodiles. Great question. And then Sophia says, are ibis and flamingos cousins? I'm going to send that out to the studio. Are ibis and flamingos cousins? Oh. Interesting. Okay, so again, the flamingo and the ibis have very similar characteristics, right? Their color can be kind of pink. They have the long legs, even a long beak. I think these guys are so cute. But they're actually not very closely related to flamingos. Now, shockingly enough, picture a flamingo in your brain. I don't think we have a picture of a flamingo, but they're a pretty common animal. So you can picture those really long legs, longer than these ones, those pink bodies, super long skinny neck, and big bill. Now, we're going to show you a bird that they are actually closer related to. Look at this. This is a grebe. It's another bird that we find here along our coast. We find them living out in the water. Does that look like a flamingo? Not really. I mean, maybe the only characteristic that we could say is this long neck. But the grebe is more closely related to a flamingo. And, Amanda told me, doves as well are more closely related to flamingos. So animals, the way they're related is very confusing. There's a lot more to it than just looking at the characteristics. But even though if animals are not very closely related, they might share some characteristics. And these things are called adaptations. Now, if we look at animals, they all have adaptations, which are special things on their body that help them survive in their habitat. And so it's pretty common to see an animal like this grebe or that ibis or that egret having some adaptations that are similar to the adaptations that a flamingo might have, because they're all birds. They might live in similar habitats, and so they might need similar features in order to survive. So those long necks, even though those birds might not be related, those long necks all help them in the same way. All right, let's check out another bird. I'm going to let Jen pick a bird for us to explore. Excellent. Now, what does this bird look like? If you would name it, if you saw this out on the water, what would you call it? We probably wouldn't call it an egret or a flamingo. Maybe a duck? Does this kind of look like a duck? I agree. It kind of looks like a duck. So this is called a ruddy duck. It's another type of bird we might find in the wetland. But as you can see for this bird, it looks very different than the egrets, than the ibis, than even a flamingo. So they're all birds. They have feathers. They live near the water. They use the wetland as their habitat. But what do you notice about this bird? So while you're making your observations about our ruddy duck, we have some more observations and questions that came in. So Jacob said, are there alligators in wetlands? Yes, just like that question came in, it seems like a lot of you have that question about alligators in wetlands, which is a great question because when you see that habitat, it might remind you of certain animals, and a lot of you think of crocodiles and alligators. So swamps are another word for a wetland, or it's a type of wetland, and swamps are often where we find alligators. But like I said before, just to make sure that we are not worried about alligators here, our wetlands here are not going to be home to alligators. They tend to like warmer waters, more swampier, and our wetlands are a little less swampy than an alligator might prefer. All right, let's take a look at our ruddy duck. Now, you notice its body is a lot more squat. You can't really see its feet, but if you look back here, this thing right here is actually the foot of a ruddy duck. They don't have those long legs like the other we looked at, excuse me, but they do have webbed feet. So think about it. Here's your hands, and they would be webbed if there was skin kind of connecting them. And ducks' feet are webbed, and that helps them to swim. So think about that. Egret is walking on the mud with those long toes to grab their food, but they're not swimming in the water like our duck, who is actually swimming. And so the duck's webbed feet, situated towards the back of their body, so they're not up front, they're towards the back, help them to paddle and swim through the water. Now, if we were to see this duck on land, they look really funny. They kind of walk side to side, kind of waddle because their feet are so far back on their body. But in the water, they're really good at swimming because of those feet. And then we notice that they don't really have a long neck or that long body. They're much closer to the water, and their beak is different. So this beak or bill on our duck is a lot more smaller, shorter, and kind of broad. And so they're going to be eating different things, whereas that egret is trying to spear the fish out of the water. Our duck is just going to try and nibble on little things that might be floating in the water, maybe trying to eat those worms or other little invertebrates, little crabs or other crustaceans they can find in the water. Now, something else you might notice. Let's see, we've got some observations coming in, and one thing I was going to say you might notice, I see that Edward says he sees a blue beak on that duck, and that's what I was going to point. Absolutely a blue beak on this duck. Now, this duck doesn't always have a blue beak, and if we were to look at all of the ruddy ducks, we would notice that some might have blue beaks sometimes, and some might not. And that's because it's the males that will have the blue beak, and it's brightest blue when it's mating season. So it's sort of like, look how nice my bill is, let's be friends. So it's for mating purposes. And then when it's not mating season, their bill is not going to be as blue as you see here. Excellent. Let's see what other observations we have coming in. So Santiago asked, do all birds eat fish? Ooh, good question. So birds who live at the wetlands, they're mainly going to be eating fish and other animals in the water. So not only fish, but things like worms that live in the water, crustaceans. So that's like crabs or lobsters, or if it's freshwater, there's crayfish, or other little things that live in the mud. So it's not only fish, but it's going to be aquatic animals if they're living at the wetlands. Birds in general can eat all different kinds of things, not always fish. Great question. And then the question came in, why are their beaks so long? So I'm going to assume that's about the ibis or the egret. And that's another adaptation. That's another thing that helps this bird catch its food, because that long beak helps them reach farther than they would be able to if they had a short beak. So all those long, tall features of those birds help them. Here we can see this is another wetland bird. We call them shorebirds too because they kind of live along the shore. And you can see that long beak is used to probe or to push into the sand, and then in there is where all the little animals they want to eat. So long beaks not only help them reach farther and kind of grab at their food, but it also helps them dig and move around the sand or the mud to find their food inside. It's kind of fun to watch them eat. Think about how we would dig with our hands. Maybe if you go to the beach and you're looking for sand crabs and you would dig really deep to try and find them. Well, our birds, they don't have hands to dig for their food, so they use their beak as a way to dig into the sand or the mud to find their food. All right, so we've talked about a couple different birds. Here's our ready duck one more time. But I want to kind of shift a little bit, and we're going to dive below the surface. Now, in wetlands, the water can be kind of deep, but it's not, say, as deep as the ocean. But we're going to take a look underneath the water and see what animals we can find living below the surface. Because all these birds, they might dive down into the water, but they mainly live on the surface. So what do you see here? So this is here at our aquarium, but this is what it might look like if you were to dive into the water at a wetland. Do you notice anything? Any animals? What about colors? What colors do you see? Or movement? Is anyone moving in this image? Yeah, so there's lots of fish. Oh, here comes a big fish. Hello. So we've got a couple different kinds of fish that we see here. And a lot of them, you may have noticed, the color on their body is silver. So they're very silvery colored animals. While you're making observations about this underwater image, we've got some more questions that come in. So Brennan wants to know, what is the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? Great question. Now, this is a tough one because sometimes it gets confusing. And I know the things to look for, but I can never remember which one is which. But Amanda, help me out. So one difference is the snout. So that means that long mouthpiece, right? Alligators kind of have that big alligator mouth or crocodile mouth. So the shape of the snout differs from crocodiles and alligators. So alligators have a wide U-shaped snout, whereas crocodiles have a very long pointed V shape. So it's much more pointier, that sort of mouth snout area. Excellent. And they tend to live in different places too, just depending on alligator or crocodile. Great question. All right. Did you have any observations about what it looks like underneath the water? So we noticed there's fish, and a lot of the fish are really silvery. Here's a silverfish. Oh, Brittany said they're silver too. Excellent observation. And Gray said fish are moving. They're definitely moving a lot. White and shiny fish. Excellent. Now, you can kind of see back here, the sun is shining in the water. And that is one of the reasons that these fish are so silvery, is because it kind of helps them blend in when the sun is shining. And that makes it harder for predators, for other animals, to try and find these fish. You might also notice I see a little bit of yellow on some of the fish when they come by on their tail. And then you said that there was movement. So their water is moving back and forth. There's a little bit of like a wave or a surge, and it's pushing the grasses. And you see the fish moving. But did you notice there are some fish hiding in this video? Take a closer look and see if you notice any fish in the sand. No worries. Jen and our timing was 1 second off, but excellent look. Take a look here. What do you notice? So you saw those bigger fish moving back and forth. But in a moment, we'll go back to the video and see if you can find a fish that looks like this one. Do you see it? Well, we can't see it now. The fish are in the way. Can you see it now? The fish is in the way now. Oh, the fish are the camera hogs. I'll point it. So there's actually a couple. There's one right here. That's the one that we just closed up. Wait till those fish move. They don't cooperate. There, right there. That's a fish. And then if you look closely here, you notice them. Fish are in the way. There, eyeballs. So we've got these silver fish that are swimming around, but there's also some fish. We call them flatfish. Excellent. Perfect timing on that one. So we've got some flatfish, and they, as their name makes them sound, are flat. So instead of the silverfish that are moving like this, you can put your hands together and move like those silverfish we saw swimming. Flatfish are flat. Now, interesting enough, when these fish are born, they're born like this. And then, this is kind of cool, their body moves and their eye travels through their body up to the top. So both eyes are on the top of their head, as you can see here. So when this fish was born, it was like this and had an eye on either side of its head, here and here. And then they turn, here we go. You can see a little baby flatfish. Now there's a couple different types of flatfish that we'll see in wetlands. We've got halibut, we've got horny head turbots, we've got sole, but all of these flatfish, they use the sand as a way to protect themselves. So they blend in. This one is a halibut. some type of flatfish, which is kind of cool. You see it's got some bright blue spots on it, but the rest of its body kind of blends in. And some of these flatfish can even change the color of their body to blend in even better to the sand or whatever is on the bottom. Ooh, this is an excellent picture. Can you find the fish in here? Well, it looks like there's a tail of some other fish over there, but this right here is the flatfish hiding in the sand. Pretty neat, huh? So we've got birds who live in wetlands, but we also have fish, flatfish, fish that are upright. And there's lots of animals, and all the things that we said those animals eat, worms and crustaceans, they all make their home in the wetland. Now, we've got 1 minute left, and I think there's a couple more questions or observations, so I'm going to take those, and I'll have Jen put up a picture of a wetland behind me so we can, it's nice and peaceful, we can watch that while I answer these last questions. So let's see. Alexa says, are the boy birds always more colorful and prettier than the girl birds? I'm not sure. I'm not going to say always, but I will say most often. So there may be one or two species where it's the girls who are prettier, but for most species of birds and a lot of other animals as well, it's the males who have the brighter colors or the bigger feathers or the more fur as sort of a show or a display to attract the female. So for the most part, it's often, though not always, it's often the male who's going to be a little more brighter colored or fluffier or bigger feathers or whatever you want to call it. All right, and Sophia and Edward say, are the fish not colorful as a way to camouflage or not get eaten? Absolutely. Great question. And you're right. That's a great observation. So their color helps them blend in, and that protects them from getting eaten. Sophia wants to know if the fish was sleeping. So those flatfish, they're not sleeping. That's just how they live. They stay on the ocean floor, and they don't move too much, and that helps them camouflage or blend in, and they can stay safe from predators. And lastly, Alexa says, do all fish sleep on the floor of the wetlands? Great question, Alexa. Just ties into what we were saying before. So not all fish are going to sleep on the bottom. Most fish, they do need to keep swimming in order to survive. They need to keep moving water over their gills to get oxygen. So most fish are going to keep swimming. But those flatfish, they are able to sit on the ocean floor, rest, sleep, do whatever fish business they have to do while they're flat in the sand. All right, Jam and Jellies, you had so many excellent observations and questions. We loved hearing from you, but we are over time. We are out of time. Now, don't fret. We've got more programming coming up. And if you like talking about birds, we are actually going to go on a bird walk. So we're going to look at more birds, virtually, of course, in our next program at 10 o'clock. So if you're still interested in learning more about birds, join us at 10 o'clock. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching. Oh, and one more thing. Gotcha. We want to remind you that there are activities with all of our programs. So the activity connected to this program are making your own binoculars, and that's going to help you bird watch and find more birds. So you can find all the instructions you need for that on our website connected with this program. Now we're all done. Thanks, everyone.